Progressive Coalition and Broward Young Black Progressives, all candidates roundtable for criminal justice reform. I want to start out by extending to Sheriff Scott Israel our most sincere wishes for a speedy recovery. He's out of the hospital and at home with his family, and he has all intentions of joining us on next Friday's roundtable. Because this is a forum on criminal justice reform, I thought it important to have two candidates for sheriff, so I invited Willie Jones to fill in for Scott Israel, and he so graciously agreed, even at the last minute. However, he does have another Zoom meeting later, so we will be joined by Santiago Vazquez at that point when he gets on. All right, so we've brought together candidates for state attorney, sheriff, clerk of the courts, and Florida's House of Representatives to share among themselves and the viewing audience their visions for a more fair and equitable justice system, what role each office plays in that vision, and how they might work together to accomplish common goals. We'll split the candidates up into two teams of three, and we'll ask both teams the same question. While team one is answering the question spontaneously, team two will go to a breakout room for private discussion. After 10 minutes, the team two will return to answer the question for the audience, and they'll take turns going first. We can't really dictate what our candidates do in the breakout room, but we're hoping they'll take the time to discuss the questions and find solutions to the problems. It's our assertion that by providing space for dialogue, we can learn about a candidate's aptitude for the office they are seeking, and that the natural leaders will shine through. Many of you have been with us for the first two roundtables. If you haven't, I'm sure you've seen your share. While there are so many important issues to address, we have found that most candidates agree on many of them. Reforming cash bail, ending the school-to-prison pipeline, immigrant rights, ending ICE, quality training, ending military-style tactics and weapons, the right to protest, prosecuting police officers, reallocating police funds, and restorative justice, and others. So while the first few questions tonight might sound familiar, we will be digressing a little from the usual subject matter. If we do not address an issue that's important to you, please feel free to contact any of the hosts tonight's event, and we will make sure to find you some answers. Now for some housekeeping. I think that Jonathan Harrington will be moderating the chat room on Facebook. If you have any questions or content suggestions, please direct them to Jonathan Harrington or Kendra Thomas in the comments section on Facebook. Carolina will be keeping time, wave Carolina, and monitoring any chat or questions from the panel. So candidates, please keep your eye on Carolina while you're speaking and direct any questions to her. And now I'll introduce to you our special guest moderator, who will take it the rest of the way. Rodney Baltimore is a South Florida treasure. He's an advocate for the Black community and Broward and Miami-Dade and Palm Beach counties. Rodney believes in strong community and has interviewed countless community organizations over the years as an on-air talent for Hot 105. He has been the producer of the Tom Joyner Morning Show, the Michael Baisden Show, and currently serves as morning show co-host on Hot 105, serving all of South Florida with over 250,000 listeners. I introduce to you to Mr. Rodney Baltimore. Take it away.
Very much, Jamie. Thank you so much, and thank you for spending some time with us this evening on Friday night. I want to thank all the candidates. I hope that we have a very lively and informative forum, which will garner you some voters. So we'll start it right now. We're going to start off tonight with an introduction by the candidates. You'll each have 2 minutes to tell us a little bit about yourself and why you're the best person for the job. And please keep an eye on Carolina. She's going to flash like 30-second warning for you to wrap it up. And then she's going to put up a sign that says stop. And we're going to go in alphabetical order. So we'll start with Willie Jones, a candidate for Broward County Sheriff, retired Sergeant. Mr. Jones, it's your turn.
Good evening. Glad to be here. Hello to everyone. My name is Willie Jones. I'm a candidate for Sheriff of Broward County. I ran in 2016. I ran in 2016 for this very same office. The reason I ran for this office in 2016 because I realized that criminal justice needed to be reformed. The agency needed a change. We needed to get out of the 20th century way of doing policing and get to the 21st century, which simply means the 20th century broken windows model didn't work anymore. Arresting people, just taking them to jail for minor misdemeanor charges did not help our community. It hurt the community. My screen is of the 21st century best police practices, which was come from a task force, which was put in place by President Obama, and it put all types of people from different spectrums, different stakeholders, and they came up with the best plan. The first one, and everybody talks about it, is building trust and legitimacy. Legitimacy simply states that if the public does not believe that the police department the agency has their best interest at heart, they're not going to allow us to police them appropriately. They're not going to interact with us. So we need to get to legitimizing our actions and what we do. We need to stop having the community serve us. We need to serve the community. We as police departments, law enforcement, must listen to the first three words of the Constitution. We the people. No, we the people, not we the police. We must stop occupying and start protecting our most vulnerable people, our youth and our elderly. See, many people say this is a political job. It's not political, but it's turned political because of special interest money, special interest politicians. We must get back to what really matters, protecting everybody, every citizen, protecting them, civil rights, human rights. Thank you. I'm Willie Jones, running for Sheriff of Broward County.
And thank you, Mr. Jones. We're going to have our next candidate for the Office of State Attorney, Joe Kimok, and you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Rodney, and thank you to the Democratic Progressive Caucus of Florida and Broward County. My name is Joe Kimok. As we sit here tonight, the families of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and Rayshard Brooks, they're at home having dinner without their loved ones, along with thousands of other family members across the country just like them. At the same time, we have 176,000 of our fellow Floridians that are sitting in cages tonight. And we didn't get here by accident. It was purposeful. Some of our very first police departments were formed to catch runaway slaves. Some of our very first jails were set up as work camps for newly freed slaves. Today, whether it's cash bail or the war on drugs or the school to prison pipeline, the criminal legal system is working exactly as it was designed to do, and that is to oppress marginalized people and people of color. I am the husband of Jordy. I'm the dad to Jackson and Julia. I'm the oldest son of Sue, who raised three of us as a single mom on food stamps and soup kitchens. I am a former high school English teacher, and today I am a major crimes attorney with the Office of Criminal Conflict and Civil Regional Counsel, where I represent folks charged with everything from misdemeanors all the way up to homicides, all folks who can't afford a lawyer. As a dad, I spend every single moment thinking about how to keep my kids safe. And never has it been more clear that the way to do that is to dismantle mass incarceration and build a brand new criminal justice system. And our community agrees. Communities around the country agree. They are marching and protesting, begging for this system to literally take its knee off of their necks, and we should listen to them. Over the last 10 days, our campaign has been endorsed by New Florida Majority, by the Dream Defenders, by Color of Change. We're in this to dismantle mass incarceration, and we're looking forward to having this conversation tonight. Thank you, Rodney.
Thank you, Mr. Kimok. Our next candidate for Florida House District 94, Mr. Elijah Manley. Good evening. You have the floor.
Thank you, Rodney. Thank you to the Democratic Progressive Caucus of Broward County for allowing me to be here. Elijah Manley, running for a state representative here in House District 94, which consists of Fort Lauderdale, Wilton Manors, some of Oakland Park, some of Lauderhill, East Plantation. And I'm running for state representative because I do believe that we need bold, new progressive leadership in Tallahassee, leadership that's going to take on the climate crisis head on, leadership that's going to take on the affordable housing crisis we're seeing in our district, leadership that's going to take on the infrastructure crisis we're seeing in Fort Lauderdale. But these are not ordinary times we're in. We've seen over the past few months, everything from protests to riots across this country because people want meaningful change in their communities. And right now they're not seeing the results that they need. So I'm running to do that. I grew up in this district my entire life on food stamps, Section 8 housing, Medicaid. I know this district. I'm willing to fight for this district, and I'm in this fight for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Manley, for being concise. And our next speaker will be that for the office of the Broward County Sheriff. We have with us former Commander Andrew Smallings from Lauderdale Lakes and Lauderhill, right?
That's correct.
Yeah.
Thank you. How you doing?
I'm
good to hear you. Thank you to the Broward County Democratic Progressive Caucus for having this forum tonight. My name is Andrew Smallin. As Rodney has said, I actually was the chief of police in Lauderdale and the district chief for the Broward Sheriff's Office in Lauderdale Lakes. I've spent 24 years in law enforcement. Currently, I am an associate dean at Broward College over the criminal justice program. So now I'm actually teaching young and upcoming officers and those seeking degrees in criminal justice. President Obama said that if you think something is broken and it's somebody in an elected position that holds that office that's broken, then you should run for that office. I see the Broward Sheriff's Office, the leadership, at least in the Broward Sheriff's Office, is broken. And this is not new. This is something that's happened now for the last at least 8 years that we've had this type of leadership. It has not been progressive, even though some candidates that are running for this office will tell you that they've been very progressive with things like civil citation and some of these other programs. I can tell you that that's a program that I did in the city of Lauderdale Lakes in the early 2000s with Harmony Development. So when you talk about progressive, it's more than just saying the words, it's actually producing results. And I've done that in the city of Lauderdale and in the city of Lauderdale Lakes, and I look to do that as
Thank you,
Sheriff
Mr.
of
Small.
Broward County. Thank you, Rodney.
Thank you very much. And next, our candidate for the clerk of the court, Mark Speiser. Good evening, sir. How are you today?
You're wiser with Speiser.
Speiser, yes.
Are you ready?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I'm ready too. Thank you for inviting me here today to this wonderful organization. The clerk of the courts basically is the backbone of the justice system. Now, if we had an effective functioning court clerk, we would basically hear nothing about that office whatsoever. In an ideal world, we should really hear nothing, especially of a negative nature, about the clerk's office. Unfortunately, the focus of all the campaigns that revolve around the court system, namely the state attorney, the public defender, the clerk's office, is focusing on the ineffectiveness of that office. Now, to run that office effectively, which has approximately 800 to 900 employees, you need someone who has a track record, a proven record of being a leader and being innovative. Because this office right now, from top to bottom, needs a complete makeover. And when I say that, and I say that for the following reasons, that the morale in that office is so low that it's incredibly sad about with respect to the salaries paid to the people that are working in the entry-level positions. It's sad with respect to the attitudes of a lot of people, which comes as a result of not being happy, having a leader that's more dictatorial rather than based upon experience and leading based upon her personality. So the morale of that office is going to be in a very, very important focus. The other demographics served by the clerk's office are the attorneys, the judges, and the consumers who use all the services from the clerk's office. Every one of those segments of the population served is very, very unhappy. Needs to have a lot of, and that office needs to make a lot of changes in order for the population to be effectively served. And I feel that I have that background and that experience and that ability to bring people together, which is.
Thank you very much. Our next candidate is for the office of state attorney, Attorney Teresa Manning Williams. Good to see you. How are you today?
Very good, Mr. Baltimore. It's great to see you too.
And you have the floor.
Thank you so much. It's great to see my friends at the Broward Progressive Caucus tonight. Many of you I know from my membership at your club. I want to talk to you a little bit just about my background. I started my career in criminal justice at the Miami-Dade County State Attorney's Office. And, you know, I worked there. I always lived in Plantation, and I commuted to Miami-Dade County because I'd always heard about the things that were happening in the Broward County Courthouse. What I didn't realize is that, you know, I worked at an office that followed the philosophies of Janet Reno. And Janet Reno was a progressive prosecutor for anybody ever coined that term. She's progressive the way that I define progressive. I define progressive in taking the money out of our political system and essentially putting the people first, and not that small elite group of people that seem to make the rules to benefit themselves. When I came to this county as a defense attorney, after working as a division chief of the career criminal robbery unit, after supervising over 200 lawyers at the Miami-Dade County State Attorney's Office, after creating their statistical database that made sure that what we were doing in the courtroom was the right thing, and basically dotting every I and crossing every T and getting those criminals that created the majority of the crimes in our county, and I became a defense attorney, I saw a system that was geared towards getting people reelected and making people money. And I ask all of you to say, actions speak louder than words. I took the bull by the horns and I ran in 2016 when criminal justice reform was inconvenient. I'm about to finish what I started. I'm Teresa Fanning-Williams. I'm qualified for this position. I've got 25 years of experience and I'm ready to change the culture of criminal justice. Thank you all so much. And I look forward to being here tonight, answering all your questions. This looks like it's going to be a really great forum. I'm looking forward to it. Thank you.
All right, now thank you all the candidates. We're going to get to the meat of the matter for this evening. You will each have 1.5 minutes to answer a question and then an additional minute to follow up comments if you're so inclined. I will have the discretion to allow you to speak longer, cut you off if you're speaking over time, and I may interrupt you. Now, if you're going off subject, I will call it the BS when I hear it. So let's get started. This is the first question. What part of the criminal justice process do you see most injustice and dysfunction? What do you see as the biggest hurdle to reform, and how will you use your platform to fix it? Candidates, with an invitation to the breakout room, you accept that right now and you'll be returned in about 10 minutes. And we're going to start off that same question with the candidate for the clerk of the court, Mr. Mark Speiser.
Okay, with respect to the facet of the criminal justice system, I see the major focus being needed is the front part, that is reducing the number of arrests and employing more and more diversion type programs. Diversion type programs are most important in the area of arrests for minimum amount of controlled substances. Diversion programs are appropriate for individuals that come into contact with the police department that readily appear or are giving symptoms that they are suffering from mental health issues. In addition to that, when I say diversion, that is taking them to facilities such as Baker Act or receiving facilities rather than bringing them to the jail. Now, there's a lot of cases where that scenario will not apply because it doesn't appear the person has some substance abuse issues or mental health issues. In those instances where they have to be put in jail for non-violent type of offenses, I think we need to heighten the number of people who would be eligible for pretrial release without the necessity of having to post a bond. And once these people are placed on pretrial release, then the onus then falls on the state attorney's office to seriously consider alternatives to prosecution. For example, the state attorney's office has recently, with the legalization of marijuana, taken a different prosecutorial stance with respect to prosecuting individuals that have less than 3 grams of marijuana and more than 3 grams of marijuana. With respect to less than 3 grams of marijuana, they will put them in an immediate diversion program. With respect to people that are charged with possessing amounts a little bit in excess of the 3 grams, those type of people will get sentences that will probably be reduced to like a minimum period of probation.
Thank you, Mr. Speiser. And also, you did mention you're a former judge. Isn't that correct?
36.5 years worth.
Okay. All right. Did you say that in your introduction?
Did I say that? I didn't mention that. I thought everybody
All right, well,
knew.
we knew it. Okay. You sound like a judge. Okay. Our next candidate for state attorney. That's a good thing. Don't worry.
Okay.
All right. Ms. Fanning-Williams.
Number one thing that I think that we need to do is to basically change the culture of our courthouse, and it needs to start with the state attorney's office. What I saw time and time again was a training and a philosophy where assistant state attorneys were essentially taught to treat people like numbers. And you see that in the empirical data when you see the trial statistics in the state attorney's office. we don't really consider you to be a human being. So we don't have any problem with putting your freedom on the line. And that's why they lose, ready for it, 85% of the cases that they try in county court, something like 45% of the cases that they try in felony court. They file cases with no evidence and try cases that shouldn't be tried because everybody just wants to pass the buck to that nameless jury who doesn't have to take political responsibility for it. And that will be the first thing that I will change. That has to be changed in many respects. There has to be hands-on implicit bias training in our courtrooms every single day. We need to be teaching people the ramifications that the system has and the toll on human life, not simply telling people to leave it in the hands of the jury. And we need to teach our prosecutors how to exercise discretion. There is no discretion in our current state attorney's office. I'm one of the only candidates in this race who's ever had experience in training that. And as your next state attorney, I promise to change the culture, treat everybody like a human being, and give you the system we all deserve.
Thank you, Attorney Fanning Williams. And of course, Mr. Jones, candidate for Broward County Sheriff.
How you doing? One of the biggest problems we have that's plaguing our community is how we police. One of the things we must do immediately once we get there is change the culture. Change the culture how we police our communities. How we're going to do that, we're going to start inside out. First, we're going to start by who we hire. We're going to change the models, the techniques, the modality of how we recruit and who we bring into the law enforcement, into the Broward Sheriff's Office. The second thing is we're going to train them. We're going to train them with community policing as a core value. We're going to train it as that this is how we treat people. We're going to serve people, not have the people serve us. Now from the outside in, we must we must garner the respect of our community. And how do we do that? We invite them to the table before a crisis. We invite them to the table for their input. So we'll know how they want to be policed. They have to be a part of our strategizing. And we must get away from the warrior mentality. Law enforcement officers are gauged by quality, how many arrests they make, how many tickets they write, by quantity. And we need to go back to quality, the quality of service. This is how we're going to change what's going on. And the biggest impediment is the culture. Break away from the warrior mentality to community police's best practice.
Thank you, and I thank all the candidates. Any additional comments, I'll give you about the 30 seconds to make that if you have one. And we'll start with you, Mr. Jones, and go to Ms. Fanning Williams and then to Mr. Speiser.
Okay. One, community policing. Community policing is not a politically expedient statement. It's not a politically correctness. Community policing is a process. It's how you do things. It becomes a core value. And it goes from not just DLE, Department of Law Enforcement, it goes for every employee of the Broward Sheriff's Office. And that's the reason we say it will become a core value and that's non-negotiable, because we have to learn how and protect and serve our community.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Attorney Fanning Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Baltimore. One of the things I want to add, mental health. One of the core things that we need to change is we need to stop digging our heads into the sand about the mental health problems that are replete in our criminal justice system. And let me give a shout out to both of my people on my team. I've seen Judge Speiser in mental health court be very, very kind and patient with individuals who have these types of disabilities. And so I'm pretty confident that we're going to have a great partner in that respect in the clerk's office when we start the mental health revolution that needs to happen. And I've seen Willie Jones.
Much, Attorney Fanning Williams. I'm
going to give Willie a shout out later. I'll squeeze it in there, Willie.
All right. And Mr. Speiser?
I want to expand on the 2 points made by Ms. Williams and Mr. Jones. Number one, the role of the prosecutor is to serve as an intermediary between the police and the courts. And the problem with the current state of the attorney's office is, at least the attitude has been, we're just going to be a funnel for the police. We're going to let the case go in front of the court and be prosecuted, and then the judge and jury will make the decision. That's absolutely wrong. It's costly for the people who are arrested, and it's not fair to everybody. With respect to what Mr. Jones is commenting about with respect to better
All right, Mr. Speiser, we'll have to give you a time in the forum to finish up, but right now we have to go to the next phase. And I don't want to hog all the time. And Mr. Santiago Vazquez, welcome to the forum.
Yeah, sure. That's a good question. I think there's a lot of reasons, a lot of things. Specifically, I think the biggest hurdle to accountability in a criminal justice system, and I'll be honest and frank, I think it's the police unions. Police unions have a lot of power in the political system through their endorsements, the amount of money they spend in these races.
That's going to be one of our questions later on as well.
So I'll try to not go too far into the police unions, but it's also cash bail too. I don't know about everyone else here, but I was once in a Broward County main jail. I know how that facility operates. And a lot of people are sitting in jail, not just for petty offenses. Maybe they were trespassing. These aren't horrible people. These aren't criminal thugs or anything like a lot of people are saying in their rhetoric. These are just essentially people who may just need more opportunities, more help, and they don't need to be in a cage. They're just people sitting in cages for reasons, for petty offenses. And I think we need to look at a more decarceral way of our criminal justice system, getting people out of jail, keeping people from going to jail, and investing money in social services to keep it up.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Vazquez, did you hear the question as well?
Yes, I did. Thank you very much for having me. I greatly appreciate it. I apologize that I was running a little bit late. I had another forum that I was attending. The first for this question for me would be the first contact. Yes, I agree with Elijah that police unions do have a lot of power, but the most important thing is that we start training our police officers, that we have the ability to make sure that the decisions that they're doing are correct and are as to make sure that the policies and procedures are correct. You've got to have compassion with people. That's the first thing when you meet contact with them out in the street. That's where the criminal justice institute starts. And the issue is that we, as police officers, minimum amount of training, and the lack of education that we have, the agency that we need to make sure that we have more of, and make sure that we hire people that have compassion, people that have the knowledge.
I think, Mr. Vazquez, you've frozen. Mr. Kimok, that same question.
Yes, thank you. Look, the state attorney is the most powerful person in the criminal justice system, which means that much of the blame of why we have mass incarceration lays at the feet of state attorneys. For decades, state attorneys have been running on platforms of tough on crime and then tougher on crime and then batshit crazy on crime, and it has gotten them reelected over and over and over again. Now, finally, we are in a time where that isn't going to work, right? And so a lot of what Teresa and I and our other opponents are talking about is what are the best things that actually dismantle mass incarceration? And because it's the decisions that the state attorney makes that are going to do that. So what we've laid out is this platform of we're going to end all cash bail. We're going to stop using mandatory minimums. We're going to stop fighting this useless war on drugs that is not a war on drugs, but is a war on people and communities. We are going to revolutionize our juvenile justice program, stop charging kids as adults. Fixing and ending mass incarceration, there is no one silver bullet to it. There is no one thing, but it is a conglomeration of extraordinary actions that we can take so that we can build a better community here in Broward County where we're not locking up all of our neighbors.
Thank you, Mr. Kimok. And Mr. Smallings, your turn, Chief.
Thank you, Rodney. Oh, by the way, it's Smalling, no S on the end.
Sorry.
The S is silent.
Okay.
No problem. Well, at what point is our criminal justice system dysfunctional, I think is the question. And I think it's really when it comes to communication, because we're talking about the criminal justice system as a whole. I can tell you in my 24 years in law enforcement that I have not gotten together as a leader and talked to the state attorney, the public defender, the clerk of the courts. I mean, I hardly ever talk to the clerk of the courts. And that's an integral part of the criminal justice system. So when we talk about the criminal justice system as a whole, I think the dysfunction starts there. Now we have in our different organizations, we each have our own dysfunctionality, but I think the whole system and how we change the system in the 21st century and be progressive has to be with the leaders getting together, talking to each other, and building a better system.
All right, thank you, Mr. Smalling. Jamie, it's your turn now.
Okay, two things. Did anybody have something they wanted to add? You get like 30 seconds if you had an additional comment.
I'll just take a quick additional comment, Jamie. You know, Rodney, I do reject the premise of the question a little bit. I don't think our criminal legal system is dysfunctional in the sense that it is working the way it was designed to work. And that is to sweep up as many people of color and push them through a system, get them to plead guilty and get them into jail or prison as possible. And so what we need to do is break down that system, not just try and improve it.
But wouldn't it be dysfunctional to one that is going through the system as a defendant?
It certainly feels dysfunctional as a defendant to somebody who feels like there should be justice and due process, absolutely. But that's not how the system was designed by our legislature or by our state attorney. It has been designed to shuffle people through as quickly and as possible and push them into jail or prison.
I was gonna add to
Mr. Manley?
Yes. So there's a number of things state reps can do. We don't have the power to single-handedly do anything, but there's a lot of power in the legislature to make some decisions, some uncomfortable decisions, and have some uncomfortable conversations around things like cash bail, mandatory minimum sentencing, and specifically the juvenile justice system. I have to say, I think cash bail is one of the biggest issues right now, that you have people sitting in jail because they just can't pay their way out. And I think this is where economics tie into this entire conversation too, where you have a system that is preying on mostly poor Black and brown people, and white people too, but poor Black and brown people who just don't have any money to really afford a lawyer, let alone anyone else. So I think I wanted to add that into the conversation too.
And
right. Thank you very much.
If I may,
Smalling?
Yeah, and that's exactly the point I was getting at, Joe. When we get together, all right, we can fix the system, because you're talking about, I'm a progressive candidate. So I want to get with you or Teresa as a state attorney and say, how do we fix this so we're not prosecuting these individuals for minor crimes, right? How do we fix this cash bail system? Judge Speiser, if you're the clerk of court. So it has to be a communication, because I can't do it by myself. It has to be that grassroots. And I think that's important. That's the only way we're going to be able to get around this as progressives.
All right.
May I also interject on that real quick? I'm sorry.
Let me get Ms. Fanning Williams first, and I'll go with you, Mr. Vazquez.
Yes.
Just to kind of engage in a conversation the way it's kind of flowed through. I agree with Joe on a lot of things, but I disagree with the fact that the system in and of itself is designed to make people money. I think that that's what it's worked into. I think that when you go back to our roots in criminal justice and you look at our criminal justice system in comparison to other countries, we were one of the first people to recognize human rights and to really look at and create a system that created due process and fairness and equity for everybody. We lost our way, and we need to acknowledge that that slavery is part of this, that Institutional racism is part of this. We need to make sure that we acknowledge it, and we need to fix it and move
Thank you,
forward.
Ms. Fanning Williams. And I'm sorry, Mr. Vazquez, your turn now.
Yes, and I do agree with Ms. Williams as well. Also, we're all talking about someone already being incarcerated. How about educating someone before they get incarcerated? How about educating them and making sure that we have mentoring programs and coaching programs so that people don't get into this situation? We can prevent a lot of this by simply having an open communication with our community.
All right, and before we get to the next session, just a little quick comment. I mean, we talked about the dysfunctional. I remember up in Rikers Island, Khalif Browder, who committed suicide because he couldn't afford a bail. That story can be just transported down here to Florida, out west to California, Oregon. And in terms of what you mentioned, Mr. Vazquez, if you go to a facility, other than folks playing cards all day or watching television, especially those that are under the age of, I would even say 21, they should be focusing on education for a mandatory of 6 or 7 hours. But that's just my opinion. And Jamie, it's your turn now.
Okay, thank you, Rodney. I'm going to go ahead and send the invitations for the breakout rooms, but from here on out, wait till we read the question, then accept the invitation, okay? Let's start. It's okay. So by state standards, Broward County has the highest rate of wrongful convictions on death row, one of the highest rates of incarceration per capita, one of the lowest rates of convictions at trial, the highest rate of direct filing for youth offenders, highly disproportionate arrests, prosecution, and sentencing of Black and brown people, as well as unrealistic and crippling economic demands that impoverish our citizens and cripple entire communities. This is an indictment of Broward's entire criminal justice system, a system in which many of you have been complicit for many years. Our community is demanding change, real change. Why should we even consider voting for any candidates who have been a part of the status quo and enabling this system of injustice for so long? And we really want to know what you've said or done publicly prior to this campaign to inform the public of these injustices being perpetrated against them. And did it have any effect? And we want to know what you've done to let us know, so we could fight for this demand, so we can fight for the criminal justice reform that we're all talking about now. So, Rodney, you want to start with?
Yeah, I'll start with Mr. Kimok. I don't see, there he's not there. Now, you spent years in this corrupt state system. You're the vice president of what the defense lawyers, public defendant. What's the vice president organization you're vice president of?
I'm the immediate past president of the Broward Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers.
All right. What, if anything, did you do with your platform prior to this campaign to inform the public about injustices against them?
Yeah, great question. So I've been a criminal defense lawyer now for over 6 years, representing folks that can't afford a lawyer. Everything, like I said, everything from misdemeanors up to homicides. I've had high-profile cases, one in particular in which an 18-year-old kid was given a $500,000 bond on a trespass case. We went to the media with that. We were very vocal, made that very much about cash bond. We were one of the very first, people weren't even talking about cash bond back then. I also represented a man who had been in prison for murder for 10 years, who was exonerated. I had his case. I went to trial and won on the retrial case and walked him out the front door. And that was covered by the media as well. I've written, for the last several years, I've written several op-eds in the Sun Sentinel about the juvenile justice system, about stuff in the bills in the legislature that needed to be passed, reform of direct file, given speeches before New Leaders Council Broward about the prison conditions and conditions that are going on in prison. I toured a whole bunch of the different prisons here in Florida and saw kind of the horrors that were going on in there, went public with that. And so look, you know, I was the first person in this race and the very first person to use the phrase dismantle mass incarceration. And now that is what this campaign has become about. And I'm really proud of that.
Well, thank you for being a maverick. And Mr. Smalling?
Yeah, when it comes to we talk about criminal justice in law enforcement or progression in law enforcement. I am a change agent. So when I went to Lauderhill, one of the things that, and Rodney, you could probably bear this out, is we didn't have that trust as a police agency in the city of Lauderhill. I rebuilt that trust. I was able to use community policing, whether it was police officers on bicycle, whether it's getting into the schools. I was proud of a particular program that I enacted in Lauderhill called ROCK, Rescue Our Kids, where we actually took kids who may be on the wrong path, not necessarily involved in criminal activities, but acting out. And during the spring break of the school session, we'd actually have like a mini camp for them where they would interact with our officers and learn different life skills. So that in addition to being a change agent with the officers of the department, enforcing that any kind of excessive force, any misuse, misguidance of our officers would be dealt with quickly and severely.
Thank you, Mr. Smalling. And Judge Speiser, we'll give you that since you have a perspective from the bench as well, even though you're running for the clerk of the court now.
Yes, I can answer that question in many ways. Number one, I created the concept of therapeutic jurisprudence, which means that justice doesn't mean doling out punishment. Justice means reaching the right result. And for those people get entangled in the web of the criminal justice system that are suffering from mental health issues or have substance abuse addictions that are not otherwise predisposed to commit crimes, then those people should not be prosecuted as the mainstream criminal, but they should be afforded, as all these problem-solving courts were intended to do and do, the opportunity to get treatment, to get linked up with counseling, to get linked up with medication, so that hopefully after they complete these programs, they leave and exit the criminal justice system in a more positive way, with more self-confidence and with links to the community where they can fall back on in the event they need additional services. Secondly, I have made it an effort to tour as many prisons as a judge as possible. Because it's important that a judge, when you sentence somebody to prison, if you have a choice to sentence somebody to 6 months, if you have a choice to sentence somebody to 1 year in prison or 18 months in prison, that's a big difference. If you've been to a prison and seen what it's like to be behind bars and in a penal institution, that difference of 8 to 9 months is significant. So, I mean, I think to really put a handle on it from a judge's perspective, it's important that you tour the programs, the prisons, so that you know that when you sentence somebody to prison, what that sentence really is going to mean.
Thank you, former Judge Speiser. Mr. Vazquez, that same question from a law enforcement perspective.
Well, thank you. My father was a victim of police brutality. I was 5 years old when it happened, and I can't believe that in today's time, that we are still going through the same issues. As a candidate, I will bring positive change to our agency. Why? Because I want to be able to hire mental health professionals. A police officer only has 8 hours of training, 16 the max if he has a CIT training, to deal with people out in the street, when in fact they don't know if someone's on medication. They don't know if someone has mental issues. We can hire mental health professionals and more social workers to assist our police officers out on the street, because once you go through the criminal justice system, it's very difficult. We should be able to work. We as the police should be able to work with the state attorney's office and the defense attorney's office to make sure that we can go through this process and have compassion with this person. See if this is a first time or if there are any resources that we can utilize in lieu of placing this person into an incarceration. That's what.
Thank you, Mr. Vazquez. All right, and any other comments before we go to our next panelist? All right, then we'll start with that same question. What have you done or said publicly prior to this campaign to alert and inform citizens of Broward County so that we have the opportunity to fight a criminal justice reform sooner. And you'll have that same question, and I don't see her on the screen, Teresa Fanning Williams.
I think she got knocked out or something. She'll be back probably.
Okay, Mr. Manley, did you hear the question? Would you like to answer it?
Sure, I'll definitely answer that. So I'll first start by saying that I'm definitely not part of the system at all. Never have been, and don't intend on being an active participant of a corrupt political system. I'm running for the seat because I think that we need voices of young people who are largely affected by this crisis of gun violence, police violence, and a racist criminal justice system designed to oppress poor Black and brown people. And what have I done before this? Well, I've done a lot. A lot of people look and say, you're 21, what could you possibly have done? From just about so many years ago, I was one of the original founding members of the Black Lives Matter Alliance, where I put my body on the line fighting against corruption from the police to the racist criminal justice system, from protesting to even going to jail. I've been a loud and vocal voice, and I was also targeted by police myself. I think we need this new voice, this new generation of young leadership, young people who feel like the system is broken, to start running for office, to start stepping up and doing a lot more. And that's exactly what I'm doing, and that's exactly how I've been loud about this. So I've been in a fight to try to help as many young people in this current situation, get them out of this trouble, and dismantle the criminal justice system, which is at its core corrupt.
All right, thank you, Mr. Manley. From one that doesn't really have been entrenched in the system to one that has, Mr. Jones, you have that same question.
Thank you, Mr. Baltimore. Well, in the 1980s, I was the founding president of the Black Police Officers Association. And also in the 1980s, I sued the city of Fort Lauderdale Police Department for racial discrimination. I was the complainant. I knew back then that the system was unfair to people of color, not only the people that we were serving, supposed to serve, but also the people that were actually serving. I've also did programs talking to youth all over Broward County on how to interact with the police, how not to become a statistic, not how to get arrested. In doing so, it was done in churches all over the county with the parents and the grandparents there. You know, I have not just stepped out and started talking about change. I've been a change agent for many years. In this past 5 years, on another radio station, I taught for 5 years. I was on the air talking about the disparities of our community, not only dealing with law enforcement, but as a system as a whole. And when you talk about being a part of the system status quo, I would say unequivocally, I'm not status quo. I cannot be bought, I cannot be paid for, I cannot be purchased, because I do believe that in order to change, you must be an individual. You must not have people whispering in your ear how to make a decision.
Thank you so much. And we have Attorney Fanning Williams back. Did you hear the question?
I don't know if I heard, if there's a new question. I was, basically on the question involving what we have done to achieve change.
Okay, you may answer.
Okay, great. I think that most of you who are part of the Progressive Caucus remember that I was the only candidate in this race who took the bull by the horns and actually ran to stand up for criminal justice reform. And because of the injustices that I saw in the courthouse, it was a huge endeavor. I basically ran a countywide race. I had very little assistance from anyone and got 48% of the vote. And I have to say, I think that there were a lot of changes in our courthouse after a result of that election. The main change is that the current state attorney is no longer running for state attorney. And I do feel that that is as a result of the fact that our community spoke loud and clear in my election when I got 48% of the vote. Republicans were not voting, I would be the state attorney right now. And so again, I asked to be permitted to come back and finish what I started. I've got some really amazing ideas that I want to implement that's based on my years of experience and the work that I did in the Miami-Dade State Attorney's Office. I can bring a fresh perspective that no other candidate can bring. And so I'm really excited about the opportunity to make the type of incredible change that I want to bring to this county as your next state attorney. Again, I'm Teresa Fanning Williams, and I ask for you to vote for me. Thanks.
And I thank you so much. And Carolina was about to give you the sign, but you are right on time as always. Now, our next question, police unions, they're very powerful. They hold much political count. They can endorse, make or break a candidate. Their contributions can buy a win. The unions negotiate the contracts with the same elected officials that have funded and endorsed. Contracts have successfully served to shield police officers from public scrutiny, accountability, as well as discipline. The police unions have become widely seen as one of the largest and most immediate obstacles to reform. As progressives, we are resolute on the right to collective bargaining in the private sector as well as the public sector. Any attempts to strip police officers of that right would be an unacceptable injustice to the labor force everywhere. What is your experience with police unions? What part have they played in this campaign that you are presently in? And how will you work with these unions to bring about a change needed to advance reform? Candidates, please accept your invitations now to the breakout room. And we're gonna start off that same question with Mr. Smalling.
Well, I could start off by saying that the police unions aren't very much fans of mine. I've dealt with them in both Lauderdale Lakes under BSO and as a chief in Lauderhill. In Lauderdale Lakes under BSO, it was mostly the sheriff that dealt with the union, so I didn't have that intimate interaction, but definitely more so in Lauderdale. And I do see sometimes being their own worst enemies when it comes to discipline, especially discipline of officers, termination of officers who are violating either the law or policy. The hiring of bad officers, I do see them being detrimental in those instances. How would I work with them and how have I worked with them? Well, I let them know that these are my standards. This is where I'm at. This is what I expect. And we work from there. You know, we have to come to some kind of agreement because they are necessary for the same reasons that you gave, the CBA and good wages and benefits and things like that. But when it comes to being on the wrong side of the law and wrong side of policy, that's where I draw the line.
Thank you, Mr. Smalling. And Mr. Jones, that same question?
Thank
I'm
you.
looking at the screen. That's why I'm choosing folks. So.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much. Yes, the unions are a problem. They're a problem when it comes to the political cycle, when it comes to endorsing candidates. If you sit opposite of the union in any form, they will not endorse you. They will not fund you. They will not do that. And I wear that as a badge of honor because I'm not status quo. I don't want them in my ear when it's time to discipline. Now, how do we plan to correct this problem with the union? Very simple. The policies and procedures of the Broward Sheriff's Office are antiquated. They're redundant. We need to sit down with the union, with all of the unions, not just the DLE side, with all of the unions, and come up with one playbook, with one policy and procedure manual to where everybody understands what is right and what is wrong, what will be disciplined, how much discipline will be done. And if the union decides they want to fight us in that arena, that's okay, because I do understand that their job is to protect my employees, your servants, from our policies and procedures and practices, not from criminality. And that's, I think, where they got it all confused. It's just labor law, benefits, undue and unreasonable punishment, and unfair practices. That's what the union is supposed to do. They have not endorsed me. Thank God.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. And Mr. Manley, that same question even though you're running for state representative 94, not sheriff?
Absolutely. I do have a lot of experience with the specifically the Fraternal Order of Police. I'll start by saying that police unions are not ordinary unions. I don't think they should exist. They operate as mafias. And I can tell you this from experience, having been targeted by the Fraternal Order of Police in a political campaign where we were trying to get the mayor of Fort Lauderdale elected, where they essentially kidnapped me and threw me in jail because I wasn't supporting their candidate, who was the former police chief. That union should not exist, because think about the military. Do you think they have a union for the military? No, because these are not ordinary workers. These are people who have power over human lives. They have weapons, they have guns. These are not ordinary workers. That's why we should not have police unions. And police unions operate in a way to stop all forms of progress. What they've essentially done is hold the state attorney's office hostage, the city commissions hostage, the sheriffs and police departments hostage from doing any real meaningful change or holding anybody accountable for the crimes that they commit, like killing people or shooting unarmed people out in the street, like we're animals. So I don't think police unions should exist. I'm not interested in working with them. I think we should take another approach. I think we should look at budgets, because budgets are value statements, where we have these unions forcing these police department, forcing the cities and municipal governments to essentially give as much money as they can to these police departments, while we starve education, while we starve housing, while we starve social services, while we're giving a third of our budget to police departments. I think budgets are value statements. We need to look at a completely new system.
Thank you, Mr. Manley. And Attorney Fanning Williams.
Well, first I'd like to say that I grew up in a union household. My aunt was the treasurer for 1199 when I lived in New York City. I had a picket sign in my hand when I was 8 years old. And I am absolutely pro-union. I support all union efforts in our county. With that being said, I certainly can understand the arguments that have been made about the influence of police unions. And I've been on both sides of the podium in reference to these issues. I have prosecuted police officers as a state attorney. I have filed civil suits against the police department for wrongful death. And I have represented police officers who have been charged with committing misconduct. I'll tell you that most of the police officers that I represented, quite frankly, there was some type of background at the police agency where their supervisor didn't like them, or some type of a political drama. That was 98% of what I was dealing with. And I do feel that the union performed a very important function in protecting their employees from those types of concerns that were happening, and making sure that there were, appropriate influences. But there have been many times where I've seen in the past where I have seen police unions take positions that I don't agree with. I know how to speak their language. I know how they look at cases. I understand what they're thinking. I've walked through their members when I've represented them in court. I know how to sit down with them, and I think they're going to respect me. With 25 years under my belt, I can speak with authority, and I think that I'm the person that can really bring everybody together to the table and help our police agencies understand that you're gonna change.
Thank you, Ms. Fanning Williams. We have to stop you right now. Well, I welcome you back, and we are still on the same question, and we're going to start with Mr. Speiser.
Okay, I think police unions are important for a limited purpose, and that is with respect to employment issues of the police officers who really have no authority and really don't have a mouthpiece on their behalf, but for the police unions. But the police unions, from my perspective, have gone above and beyond that. I think they realize that because there's strength in numbers and they have so many members and are able to, through dues and membership obligations, they become very financially powerful as well. But I think the police unions have gone above and beyond what they originally contemplated for, and that is really to represent the members of that union who don't have power, don't have rank with respect to bargaining against the administrators of the police department, so that for wages and for job security, etc. But I think they've gone far afield of that by extending their power into the area of determining whether or not police officers have steered away from what should be their responsibility and their obligations as a police officer. That's not really for them to decide. That should really be either for a citizens board to decide, or should be up to the state attorney's office to decide whether or not someone has steered away so far from their role as a police officer that they need to be prosecuted. So I do see a role, but it has to be more limited from police unions.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Vazquez, that same question.
Hi, okay. I've been proposing this basically my whole career. The police unions are a collective bargaining unit, and the police have the right for due process, which is fine. But the unions must understand, and they must come together with our agency and determine if the police officer committed a crime or a policy violation, and then go through that process. But if the police officer has committed a crime, then it needs to go through the judicial service just as much. I will tell you, yes, the internal affairs must not have police officers investigating police officers. That's why I'm proposing to have a CART program, which is a community awareness response team. That is to prevent issues with police officers, where we'll have members from our community, activists from our communities also respond to the scenes where they can determine if a police officer is doing something wrong, and or if work as a mediator on that side. And once again, a civilian review board is what we need, definitely. And we need to have that immediately. Just like I said in 2016, that FDLE should be investigating our police officer shootings. That's what we need to do now.
Thank you, Mr. Vazquez. And that same question to Mr. Kimok.
Thank you, Rodney. Yeah, the state attorney should have absolutely nothing to do with the police unions. It's why I believe I was the only candidate in my race who refused to meet with them when they invited all of us for their endorsements to seek their endorsements earlier in the year. I was the first candidate in the race to sign the No Cash from Cops pledge. Look, the state attorney is responsible for holding bad police officers accountable. Unions are responsible for trying to protect bad police officers. And so we should absolutely, a state attorney candidate should never hold out his or her hand for an endorsement or cash from them, knowing that then they are going to be responsible for holding those police unions accountable. Police unions have been barriers in quests to put body cams on police officers, for reform at the legislative level, whether it's mandatory minimums or policing reform. They have fought against defunding of police and reinvesting that money into our communities. And so, you know, that is something that very much distinguishes my campaign from my opponents, is that as a candidate, I refuse to seek their endorsement or their cash, and as a state attorney, which means you can trust that I will hold them accountable.
Thank you very much. Mr. Manley, you had a question?
Yes, I wanted to know if I could just add briefly on my remarks too. Just so people aren't confused, I'm definitely pro-union. I'm not pro-police union, because there is no other union.
Well, I'm glad you made that distinction, because I thought you were just an anti-union guy.
No. Absolutely not. I support unions. I don't support the police union, because no other union has that type of power where they can stop any worker.
Okay, we've got it.
Rodney, can I chime in?
Yes, sir.
I've been a union member my entire adult life. My first job was not in law enforcement, and I was a union member. I do believe the unions have a valid spot and the role to play, is that they need to understand the guidelines of what they're supposed to be doing. Labor law, labor practice, protecting people that way, not criminality.
All right, well, I thank you. One of the things I want to say about bargaining for the common good, and Jamie, just give me just a second. We suggest the best way to influence the issue of police brutality and the blue wall is to engage unions rather than isolate them. This concept is known as bargaining for the common good by opening up the bargaining sessions to public oversight or by formally giving community groups a seat at the table when unions hammer out their contracts with cities, unions, and community groups and can advance the common goal that benefit both police and the people they serve. And I think Mr. Kimok kind of made reference to that in one of his answers. And I'm going to just turn it over to Jamie right now.
Okay, great. Thank you, Rodney. Well, we have everybody out front. I want to try something different. I read this in a forum a couple days ago, and I thought it might be fun. You might not, but that's okay. We have a list of recommendations for the sheriff and police departments to push back on police misconduct and to help create a culture of service and accountability. These are common sense standards that most other professions have had in place for decades. So Rodney's going to read each part of that list, and we want to know if you guys agree or disagree. So when he reads off one of the suggestions, we'd like you, if you agree, to hold your hand up, extend your fingers. And if you disagree, to hold your hand up in a closed fist. We're going to have the gallery view on, so everybody will be able to see everybody at the same time. And I know it doesn't allow for a lot of discussion or explanation, but we'll think of it like a test of your instincts, like a knee-jerk reaction. So Rodney's going to go ahead and read the list. And like I said, if you agree, hold your hand up. If you disagree, hold it in a fist. And let me just change the view and we'll get started. Hold on a second.
I will let you change it. So basically an open hand and a closed hand. I can't be seen or can I be seen?
No, I don't know why you don't have video, Rodney. The whole time you haven't had video.
I didn't realize that. Let's see if I can start. Here we go.
Hey.
Just for clarification, we're going to be raising our hand if we agree and
It
close.
doesn't matter which hand. Yes, yeah, if you agree, if you like that idea, but open your hand. If you don't like the idea, close your fist.
Okay. All right. Now, 3-strike rule for cops.
What was that? Can you say it again?
A 3-strike rule for cops. 3 strikes, you're out. All right. How about a national database of police misconduct?
Trying to make sure you can see my hand is out.
Yeah. Okay. I was looking for you, Ms. Fanning Williams. Liability insurance for officers.
Sure.
Paying civil suits from the police pension fund. I don't see some hands.
What was the question?
Paying civil suits from police pension funds.
That way,
From the
hit him in the
individual,
pocket, basically.
from the individual police officers' pension fund, or just collectively from all the departments?
I would imagine it would be the union because that's going to probably be their big representative.
Okay.
Right, but for me, it depends on the circumstance.
This is just an instinct game. Let's go with it.
No.
All right. A minimum of an associate's or a bachelor's degree in criminal justice.
I'm not going to agree to that.
Okay, no problem.
No. I don't think you need that to have common sense.
Huh?
I think we need good people with common sense. And, some people are book smart and some people aren't. And I think that we should have, there are many good police officers that aren't necessarily.
Time for discussion.
No problem. A national certification exam. All right. Statewide certification exam. State license requirements with biannual renewal. Mandatory recertification every 2 years on use of force, de-escalation, sexual assault, and dealing with mental illness.
That was fun.
I can't see your hand. Okay. All right. All right. Well, thank you so much. That was fun and interesting. Thank you so much. We're going to go to our next question right now. Creating pathways to successful reentry for formerly incarcerated citizens is just as incumbent upon the community and the criminal justice system as it is on. And Jamie, you can pick up on this because I just dropped my script.
So creating pathways to successful reentry for formerly incarcerated citizens is just as incumbent upon the community and the criminal justice system as it is to the individual. Transformation and redemption is expected. We pay for it, we demand it. Yet the for-profit prisons and jails have been failing us in their promise to rehabilitate and educate.
All right, now, and I'll pick up there. Instead, they monopolize on access to basic services and then extort inmates and their families to use them, creating huge economic and social pressures in our community. We send parolees out with $50 and the clothes they came in with, unaware, ill-prepared, underskilled, undesirable. We saddle them with economic burdens, social restraints, and legal obligations that make parenting or employment near impossible. We send our people back to freedom with only the tools for failure. There can be no sustainable drop in the rate of recidivism until we, as a society and a justice system, embrace successful reentry of former felons as an antidote for mass incarceration. Now, do you believe we have a responsibility beyond the punitive to ensure the successful reentry of formerly incarcerated citizens? And what role can your office play in their success? And we'll start that question with Broward County Sheriff candidate Willie Jones. Mr. Jones.
Yes. Our agency at once upon a time played a major role in that. We had many social services programs that was at the stockade and some offered at the main jail. We had the GED programs. We had mandatory school education class for the minors, for the kids underage. We had workforce that partnered with us so we can actually help them get jobs and get them prepared for jobs. And we need to put those programs back in place, because if we don't, in the question you mentioned that they're going to come back. We had people from the housing sector that will come in and talk to inmates who were about to be released to make sure their housing was adequate, that they would not become a burden on the families, nor would they become homeless in the streets. So the answer to the question, yes, we have a responsibility to educate, elevate people that are incarcerated before we turn them back loose into the free society.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. And we'll ask that same question with Mr. Kimok.
But, you know, we have 96,000 people in our Florida's prisons right now, most of whom are going to come home at some point. The reentry programs that we have are a drop in the bucket based on the need. Florida doesn't fund them, our communities doesn't fund them, our cities and towns don't fund them. So yes, our Broward County Commission and our state legislatures need to invest heavily in reentry in order to help these folks come back from prison. But from a state attorney's perspective, the best thing that we can do to dismantle mass incarceration and decrease crime is stop sending so many folks to prison in the first place. And so what we've committed to doing is to make diversion the rule, not the exception. Let's keep folks out of the system without these convictions on their record that hamper their ability to get a job, hamper their ability to find housing, to get a loan, to go to school. And through individualized structured diversion programs, actually attack the underlying causes of the crime, whether that be poverty or mental health or substance abuse disorder. Folks are committing crimes for a variety of reasons. Jails and prisons doesn't address those, it just sends them away. But with structured, individualized diversion programs that we expand to a much larger segment of our folks that are coming into the system, we can actually decrease crime in the long run and keep these convictions off folks' records that hamper them.
Thank you. And we'll ask that same question to Mr. Smalling.
Absolutely. We have a responsibility for those folks that are currently incarcerated. I know in the Broward County jails right now, there's not enough programs, there's not enough viable programs that give these individuals skills. A lot of these individuals want an opportunity to learn a skill, get their GED, finish their basic education, So that's something that we should be affording them. Something as simple, and I worked with someone who told me this, that there's inmates that are released that don't even have ID cards. Most of them don't have driver's license or whatever, but not even a basic ID card, which is something that, on the street when our officers, deputies stop people, they have a habit of asking for ID and things like that. And something so simple to get an inmate an ID card before they're released, work with the Department of Motor Vehicles to get that simple item is something that we can do to help somebody.
Didn't know that. Thank you very much, Mr. Smalling. Mr. Vazquez.
Yes. First, we need to educate our youth on what crimes are happening here in Broward County and how to prevent that. Let's look at giving them goals and not reasons to get arrested, and not allowing them the opportunity to look at committing a crime. They should be looking at getting their goals. We should have resources for members, inmates that are coming out of our jails. The resources that they should be getting is, knowledge of housing, where to get it, because when you get arrested, apartment complexes don't want you. You've done your time. Why is it that you're still going through time when you come out? We need to talk to our state legislators to see if there's something that we can do to hide that or eliminate that from the public, so that this way they do still have the opportunity to get homes, to get housing, to get more education. They don't get government assistance. This is the problem that we have. We are so concentrated on them inside the jail and giving them minimum abilities to perform inside the jail and have rights inside the jail, that when they do come out, they're still going to prison. They're still in a prison form. For me, I've been working with a lot of felons out here. We get them jobs, we get them job placements, and not only that, but we learn their skills and give them to get a business license so they can start their own business, so that this way they have a responsibility and they can educate themselves that way.
Mr. Vazquez, I'll have to stop you there, but we get the gist of what you're saying. And I believe I've asked all the panelists that same question that are on the screen right now. So we're going to start with Mr. Manley.
Okay, I'm not on mute, so great. So that's a great, really great question. And there are certain things I just can't do from the legislature besides modernize statutes. But the first thing I think is this goes beyond specifically the criminal justice system. This has a lot to do with our economic system in general. We need to make sure that all people have good paying jobs readily available for them. That's why I support a jobs guarantee through a really comprehensive and strong public jobs program in the state of Florida, where all people, regardless of their past and prior conviction status, are able to get a job. I fundamentally believe in banning the box so that people are able to get jobs. I don't think that your past convictions prohibit you from being able to get employment in the future or get certain benefits or vote or anything unless you are a danger to society in itself. So that's one thing. I think the other thing that we have to look in and talk about is the criminal justice system and how it's designed for people to fail. It's designed to take people out of their families, put them in jail, and designed to oppress them when they come out. So we have a system is set that makes it harder for those people when they get out to get a job. So that in return creates a higher recidivism rate where people who get out of jail, they can't get a job, they can't get housing because of housing discrimination, they can't get certain benefits, so they have no choice but to turn to crime. So I think what we need to do is ban the box. We need to look at alternatives to the housing discrimination we see that bans people from getting, renting if they have a conviction, employment discrimination as well. So there's a lot, but those are in short.
All right, thank you, Mr. Manley. And Judge Speiser?
Prisons don't really prepare people for reentry. They're just basically a place to house people who have been convicted and to the extent possible, protect them from harm from other inmates. So I think we definitely do need to do more with respect to preparing people for being reassimilated into society. We're incapable of doing that now because of dollars and cents. There would have to be such a tremendous reallocation of funds by the legislature for this undertaking, that the only way to do this, and I think this is really something we have to consider, is adding to our tax rate, whether it be a penny or whatever amount they determine that will generate enough funds, because really it's a revolving circle with respect to too many inmates who are released. They have families, they have pressure, they don't have the education, they don't have the housing. So yes, it's a big problem, and it's like a spinning wheel in a merry-go-round. No one can get off it. No one can get off it. So I agree. We have to re-emphasize, because if we're going to send as many people to prison as we are now, we need to be better prepared to accept them back into society. But that's going to take a lot of money, and I think that should be raised to do that.
I didn't mean to cut you off. I'm sorry.
I'm finished. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And Ms. Fanning Williams?
I agree with Judge Speiser in that I recommend that we do raise some bond money specifically for a mental health type of facility to help with reentry. I am sick and tired of doing the same thing over and over again that doesn't work. It's a major part of my platform. And I quite frankly believe that our system, this is heading to the sand when it comes to people with mental illness, and that probably 75% of the people that I've represented have some type of a mental health problem that's been undiagnosed and untreated. So I feel that we do need to get bond money to pull together a central receptacle for mental health and dealing with mental illness in our criminal justice system. There's a program that's been recommended by Judge Steve Leifman in Miami-Dade County that I've been studying, looking to implement, and I want to implement something similar in Broward, which essentially provides treatment, job training, housing, and puts our population of people who suffer from mental illness back on the right path, because I think that is probably 90% of our problem. The second thing that I want to do is I want to stop waiting on our Florida legislature to decide that our priorities are what they're going to fund, because all they really seem to care about is getting themselves reelected. And so what I'm about is basically implementing our community-based programs into our criminal justice system. I've seen all these amazing programs out in the different areas of our county, and nobody is utilizing them in criminal justice. We are not availing the criminal defendant who has just resolved their case and is now on probation to the benefit of these amazing programs with people who care about them and understand where they're coming from. And
thank you, Ms. Fanning Williams. I'll have to just cut you off from there. I think we've addressed this question to all the panelists, and I'm going to give you the opportunity, Mr. Jones, for your comment, and then I'll give you 30, 45 seconds, as well as any other those that are on the screen.
Yeah, as the sheriff, we control the budget. We control the expenditure of the budget. And what most sheriffs and most administrators have done in the past is that when it came to community programs, reentry programs, that was the first line item they cut, because they did not realize the value or the necessity of those type programs to help the community. So as the sheriff, we're going to take each program, each line item, and see what's more valuable, not to us as an industry, as an agency, but what's more valuable to the community and the people who are serving.
Any other ones? Judge Speiser?
Yes, basically the scenario that we're talking about here is what I call the classic definition of insanity. That is, we're doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result, and it's not happening. So the legislature has to open up its eyes. It has to advocate. A bond isn't going to solve this problem, because this problem is going to be continuing ad infinitum. It's going to have to be a tax, through a tax measure, because that tax measure is the only way I can see that we're going to be able to raise enough money to do what is necessary to stop this revolving door process.
Well, all right. You're one of the few candidates that will be the advocate of a tax with the guts. And you had something, Mr. Manley, I see you raised your hand.
Yeah, definitely. He mentioned the legislature. So I thought, as a candidate running for the legislature, I do think that it's going to take an increase in tax. I know that's not as popular with a lot of people down here. They don't want to see their taxes go up, but it's going to be the only way to address a lot of these problems, to get the revenue we need, because we don't have an income tax in Florida. So that undercuts us a lot. So I definitely think there needs to be it's probably not going to end up being a bond. And I don't know if it's even going to pass the legislature at this point, but I definitely think we should be advocating for some type of system, maybe even some type of trust fund to set up where we can get that funding in the hands of our county and municipal governments. But the biggest issue is the preemption. When a lot of the counties and municipal governments try to do certain things, the legislature will preempt them. So I think preemption is one of the biggest issues. We need to champion home rule and allow the municipalities to do what they think is best.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Smalling, then Mr. Kimok.
Yeah, just real quick. I think that we could probably solve this thing locally because we do have different resources right here within Broward County where we can get jobs and workforce type activities for our inmates. I mean, Jim Moran did it with the Automotive Training Center. There's other, Dwight Stevenson, he and I worked on a program when I was in Lauderhill to get inmates that were coming out into construction. So I think we can solve this problem locally. We just need to communicate with each other and get it done.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And Mr. Kimok?
I just wanted to disagree with my friends Willie and Elijah that we would necessarily have to raise taxes. I think, the Broward Sheriff's Office has a budget of $980 million. Mm-hmm. The Department of Corrections has a budget of $2.3 billion. And if you think about when we talk about defunding police and prisons, think about what we could do with just 10% of that. The beds that we could create for mental health and substance abuse disorder and the reentry, the outstanding reentry programs that we could create by decreasing our prison population by 10% and maybe stop spending so much money on our local jails and militarization of police.
Thank you so much. And we may.
I want to add something.
Jamie?
Yeah, real quick. That it wasn't Willie who suggested tax. Willie was actually saying that you could take money from the police department and divert it towards these kind of programs.
Yeah, I was going to clarify. I was going to clarify that. I know my time was up, so I was also going to say that I do think that budgets are value statements, and right now a third of our budgets, like Mr. Kimok said, almost $1 billion. So there's room to wiggle around and look at where we're spending resources to, where we can cut certain things away. I think police is probably going to be that's probably going to be the most important.
And that's what Willie said as well.
Yeah, that's not, yeah, but we can reallocate all the funding for resources like this, but it's not up to the legislators. It's up to the sheriff to make that decision. And the problem is we've had poor leaders and making this decision and not caring about the people that are incarcerated. And that's the difference with me, because I'm bringing positive change to that. So that's what it is.
Well, thank you very much. We're going to get to Mr. Kimok. In the past, you've talked repeatedly about decriminalizing sex work. Yet Florida is the epicenter for human trafficking in the Northern Hemisphere. And how would you differentiate between the two? And how would your office protect the thousands of women and children who suffer in this industry?
Sure. The criminalization of sex work is what drives human trafficking. It drives this activity underground. It makes it less safe. Folks have to go to places where it is where in the shadows. And if we were to provide real safety for sex workers, folks that voluntarily want to do whatever they want to do with their own bodies, then we should do that. As a man, I have absolutely no authority to tell any other woman or man what to voluntarily do with their body. And what's more is I certainly don't have the moral authority to put somebody in jail for it. And what's even more is putting folks in jail for it makes it less safe. It makes them less safe in their health. And by driving it underground, it fuels this human trafficking. So yes, we must be aggressive in combating and fighting the horrible people that are actually out there trafficking individuals. But the one way to do that is by bringing consensual activity out of the shadows.
Now, how would you differentiate this from those that are victims? Oftentimes we see victims or those that are in it because they're trying to pay a bill. They're trying to eat. Some are forced into. How would you make that distinction?
Well, look, the reason that somebody gets into voluntary sex work is their own reason. Yeah, some folks do it for money. Some folks do it because that's what they want to do. That isn't my, I don't have the moral authority to judge why somebody's doing that work. What I do have the moral authority and the legal obligation to do is to investigate and prosecute the thugs that are imprisoning folks and using them for their own benefit. There is an extraordinary difference between those two. I don't think the difference is particularly difficult to discern.
Any models that you could make reference to that is successful anywhere?
Sure. I mean, the sex work is decriminalized in Amsterdam. It's decriminalized in a couple of cities across the country where they're just no longer prosecuting it, but they're still going after the traffickers that are bringing it in.
Okay, all right, thank you. In the aftermath of the awful and inhumane murder of George Floyd, the movement for Black Lives Matter initiated a conversation about defunding the police. And this concept visualizes a system that invests more in community efforts and services rather than increase in police officials and the militarization of the forces. And I want to know if you support this, and if yes, explain. And also, what I've been noticing lately is that folks want to change the verbiage of that defunding the police, because now it's scary, and it's not scary if you know what the intent was. And we'll start with you, Mr. Jones, and that.
Okay, defunding the police. Yes, I support that, but I support it as reallocation. Defunding is a term used when people are talking about budgets. When they're talking about taking one line item that is no longer needed and reverting the money to a much more needed source or resource. So when we start talking about defunding, it's not taking police officers off the road. It's not taking dispatchers out of the call center. This is simply saying, I have too much money. For example, the school board, the school system, they defunded some money from education. And where did they put it? Charter schools and vouchers. They didn't close the schools down. They just saw another avenue to get a bigger bang for their bucks. So if we use that same premise when it comes towards policing, instead of buying more armored vehicles, buying more rifles, training police officers to shoot more often, let's take some of that money and put it to the necessary training of de-escalation, more to get away from the war mentality, to protection, more to community policing type activities, involving the community in all of our policing. I missed my word.
I get the gist of what you're saying,
Okay.
Mr. Jones, and we're going to ask that same question to Attorney Fanning Williams.
Well, my take is this. I had a case with the city of Pembroke Pines where there was a woman who was armed in her home. She weighed all of about 100 pounds and, maybe she was about 5'2". They drove a mini tank through her backyard in what was like some type of hostage situation. It almost seemed like it was such a gross overreaction. And I've seen that happen on many circumstances. I have been talking about how our police agencies tend to be more militaristic in their approach. And it is most certainly, I am fully in agreement with basically looking at where we are spending our money and gradually over time reallocating and placing our funding, which is now currently put towards more military aspects of police work, and placing it into community policing. And I believe that that is something that should be evolving over time after people have the opportunity to study the effect on public safety. And I think it's an excellent idea and I fully support it.
Thank you very much. Mr. Vazquez, that same question.
Okay, well, thank you very much. First, I would like to have compassion and integrity coming into the agency and recruiting the right people with the right temperament and having an independent oversight for it. you know, my father, once again, was a victim of police brutality. And that happened in 1974. And it should not happen here in Broward County in 2020. And it's shameful to be that it's happened nationally. And if we don't do something about it now, and I'm so glad that everyone here has the same thought process on changing police work and changing criminal reform. And that's what's going to benefit Broward County. So I thank everyone for that. And hopefully we can all work together on making change. And thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Manley.
A very great question, and I'll tell you what defunding police mean to me. I know I've said this a lot, but I do think the budgets are value statements. And what defunding police mean to me, it doesn't mean reallocating funds within the police department itself. It means taking money away from the police and putting that money to other things like housing, like social services, like education, like infrastructure, like roads, like sideways. Now there's a big movement to kind of get that mixed up about what these means, what this term means, but it does not mean reallocating funds within the police itself. It means taking those funds away from the police, which have about 30 to 40%, sometimes 50% of municipal and county government spending goes towards police, while education is being defunded. So when we talk about the word defunding, Republicans, Democrats, they know what that word defunding means when they're talking about defunding education, when they're talking about defunding healthcare and Planned Parenthood. When they're talking about defunding everything that has to do with working people, they know what the word defunding means. But when we're talking about the police, they don't know what that means. What defunding police mean to me is we're going to build housing, get people into affordable housing. Public housing, I believe, is a human right. We're going to invest in our infrastructure. We're going to invest in our education system. We got schools out there that are crumbling, that are falling apart. They don't have textbooks with even the 44th president in them. So we need to move money away from the police. They don't need, like Broward Sheriff's Office doesn't need $1 billion. We need to put $1 billion into our infrastructure, which is falling apart, $1 billion into our roads and highways and bridges that's falling apart, into mental health and to healthcare access to people. So that's what defunding police means to me.
Thank you, Mr. Manley. And person that has control of funds, Mr. Smalling.
Had control, not anymore, Rodney. Defunding, when we talk about defunding the police, it's a tricky subject, right? Because the sheriff's office, we always talk about police doing more social services, right? The Broward Sheriff's Office has those types of entities within the sheriff's office that does social services. So we have to be careful when we talk about defunding the police, because in an organization like the sheriff's office, they do those types of social services. Now, I do agree that there's probably room in the budget where we don't need to expand on police anymore. Here's something for you. There might be some areas within our county that are over-policed, that don't need as many police. So that might be a way that we can take those funds and put them towards, as Mr. Manley said, other areas, education, housing, things like that. But when we talk about, especially for the sheriff's office, taking away monies, we can impact. It's not just impacting police services, but you have child protective services, you have probation and parole, you have different things that are within that $1 billion sheriff's budget that's going to be impacted as well. And those are some social service issues and services to the community.
Thank you, Mr. Smalling. Mr. Vazquez, did you answer the question? If not, I'll go to Mr. Speiser.
Very quickly, I just want to say that defunding the police, it's wrong to do. Okay, I'm just going to be blunt out there and say it. What we need to do is reallocate the money. The only problem that we have is, has anybody here ever been a victim of a crime? Has anybody here called 911?
I believe, I'm pretty sure.
Right. Has anybody called 911 in the last 19 months? That's a problem that we have. We have a problem here. It's because the sheriff, the past sheriff as well, has not reallocated the money the right way. So this is the problem that we have. We have people that are yelling that we should defund the police, but in fact, we need to make sure that we reallocate the money to resources.
Thank you, Mr. Vazquez. And we're gonna go, and just for some clarification, did I give you an opportunity earlier to answer that question? Okay,
Yes, yeah,
all right.
I was
all
just giving.
Okay, all right, all right. We'll give you guys a chance to wrap up in just a second. Judge Speiser, you the
Yes,
same.
I think the phrase defunding police is the wrong bell ringer, the wrong moniker for what needs to be done here. And I agree, the word of reallocation of funding, I think would be a better would sell better what needs to be done here, because there's a lot of people who aren't necessarily ultra conservative, 100% pro-police, that would probably buy into the fact that we're not taking away money and sending the message, we're not taking money away from the police, we're just reallocating how it's spent. Because this past, the last 3 decades, we've done nothing but try and militarize the police rather than improve policing. And so from my perspective, the reallocation of funds doesn't necessarily mean that it still should all go to the police, because it may be best spent and it may sell better to the public if we have some outside agency, another agency that's established by the city or by the county that oversees the law enforcement agency, to make sure that training is improved, that training is more adequate, that hiring of more minorities is satisfying what is necessary for the community. So this whole concept of defunding the police, I think, was just it was intended to mean the same thing. I think we're all agreeing here. We're all agreeing. I don't think that the police should be totally stripped and naked of their funding, but rather just funding should be necessary to carry on, for the police to carry on what they need to do in a non-military like fashion. With respect to enlightening police, with respect to increasing the number of minorities, that's something I think, and other programs, I think would be a better sell.
All right, thank you so much. Now, all the panelists, have you answered that question? And if so, I'll give you Joe, Mr. Kimok. Oh yeah. Oh.
Look, I think those of us that are running for sheriff and state attorney, we should be running to build a world where we don't need police and prisons anymore. And if we're not trying to do that, I don't know what we're doing. We may not get there in our lifetime, but we may not get there shortly. But in order to get there, we must, yes, defund the police. Call it what you want, reallocate, reinvest. But police come after the fact, vast majority of crimes, right? And so if we really want to decrease crime, we should take that money and invest it in affordable housing and mental health beds and substance abuse beds and after school programs, things that actually serve to decrease crime in the long run. Where do we get the money from? We take it from the militarization of police, and yes, we take it from our local jails. The Broward Sheriff's Office spends $250 million a year just on their 4 jails. We reduce that jail population just by 20%. Think about the money that we can save and put back into our community. And so I don't think, I agree with Elijah. I don't think that the money should stay within the law enforcement agency itself. It should be put into the communities, into the people's hands themselves, so that we can actually keep each other safe.
Well, thank you very much. And one of the great books of Michelle Alexander's, the Mass Incarceration, I guess you've probably seen it back, but she talks about police departments getting these federal funds, and you see the, as Attorney Fanning Williams mentioned, a tank, or these armored vehicles and equipment that you would see in a military conflict in our city streets. And but I would suspect that these agencies do it because of the money that they can get without the hurdles. Now, activists in Broward County have extended the hours of peaceful protests only to be harassed and provoked by the police. They've been beaten, arrested upon arrival. Should officers be charged with violating civil rights and excessive force? And should prosecutors be arrested or prosecuted? We saw what happened even today. The young lady in Miami, Attorney Ben Crump, is going to help Nora Fanning. We saw with Officer Ponderance shoving a protester here in Broward County. We saw the SWAT team in Fort Lauderdale celebrating shooting unarmed individuals. So your take on the activists that we see in our very own county, and we can go with you, Miss. Oh, I don't see her. We can go with you, Mr. Manley.
So yeah, I've been with the Black Lives Matter Alliance, since I was like 13 or 14. I'm not sure. I was really young, and every single encounter with law enforcement has been negative. Where they don't have any respect for protesters. They don't have any respect for people exercising their First Amendment rights, except for white supremacist groups, which bring AK-47s to their protests. They get police escort. They get treated as first-class citizens. But people who are fighting against police violence are attacked. I was there when the young lady was pushed and shoved by that officer. What I saw was officers unprovoked shooting rubber bullets and tear gas at peaceful protesters. I got tear gas for nothing. I wasn't doing anything, standing there watching. And I called the mayor up and I said, listen, this is what your officers are doing on the street to people out there. So I think we need to look at a new approach. I think we need to cut back on it. I don't think we need police responding to these protests. I don't think they need to be there. They're not invited for sure. I know that. They don't need to be there. What we're seeing is a police state. We're seeing the rise of fascism where these police officers think they can do whatever they want because, let's be honest, no one's going to hold them accountable. The police union isn't going to hold them accountable. The state attorney's office isn't going to hold them accountable. The police department is not going to hold them accountable. The city commissions. So they operate as thugs out on the street, doing whatever they want, whenever they want, because they know they are protected. And I think that's what needs to change right now in this place.
Well, thank you very much. And Mr. Smalling, coming from a law enforcement background, your perspective.
The police are there to protect. First Amendment rights, freedom of speech, freedom to assemble. The police are there to protect. You need to hold them accountable when they do not protect. I don't agree with Mr. Manley that they shouldn't be there. Any of these groups that protest peacefully should be able to do just that. And the police provide that protection. They're out in the street. We don't want anybody getting hit by cars. We don't want anybody antagonizing those groups that are peacefully protesting. And that's what the police serve to do. If they don't do that, then yes, we do hold them accountable, and we've seen that happening. As sheriff, I will hold my people accountable, whether it's protests or anything else that's going on the street where they use excessive force or force that they shouldn't be using, or any kind of criminal violations of the law. And that's the simple, honest answer. Officers, police, deputies are there to protect. That's their job. That's what you as taxpayers, that's what we as taxpayers pay them to do.
Thank you very much, Chief Smalling. And let's speak to you, Mr. Kimok, because you've seen it from the perspective as a prosecutor as well as a defense attorney.
And a protester. I've been out most weekends over the last couple months. I'll be out again this weekend. What we see there, those of you who are watching, you really should go because it is beautiful. I mean, it is people in our community who are standing together and demanding extraordinary change from their elected officials, from their law enforcement, which is exactly how democracy should work. We also see some really ugly stuff. The officer that shoved the woman, and then for the entire world saw it on video, and then it took weeks before the state attorney's office filed any charges. If that had been a civilian doing that to another civilian, they would have been arrested immediately, and charges would have been filed, would have been brought to jail that night. Charges still have not been filed against the officers involved with shooting rubber bullets. We have the young woman who has testified before Congress about what happened, and yet her the person that did that to her has not been held accountable. And so it's a bit of irony that the protesters are talking about these two systems of justice that we have for civilians and for police who break the law, and it's happening on the ground at the same time. And we have to be profoundly aggressive in how we deal with that at the state attorney's level.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Speiser.
Well, I agree that if we're focusing about prosecuting police officers for exceeding their authority? Is that the focus of this question?
Yeah, that was pretty much how they're treating the protesters.
Okay, yes. Well, there's no question that there's been obviously so many televised instances which are starting to hit at home, even among the law enforcement personnel themselves, with respect to abuse of police authority. And I think the police believe that they have strength in numbers, but when it comes down to being prosecuted, they realize that they don't have that strength in numbers because they themselves, he or she themselves, are sitting there at the defense table by themselves. So yes, I think that police officers that exceed their authority definitely need to be prosecuted, a greater emphasis on that to get the message across that, listen, no one's above the law. Everyone is treated equally. And just because you have a uniform doesn't give you a license to hurt or a license to maim.
Thank you very much.
Will we prosecute police officers for committing crimes against protesters, or will we prosecute Florida civil rights violations?
Right.
Would you like me to go ahead and answer?
Yes, go ahead, please.
Yeah, anybody who violates the law in this county is going to be prosecuted. We're not going to have a system at the state attorney's office where police officers' conduct is rubber stamped, where people look for excuses, where we have ridiculous explanations that are put into writing that would absolutely make people's heads spin if they saw what's been happening over there for the past 40 years. The times are now changing, and that is over. We will not be a mouthpiece for the police agencies, and we will do justice. And when a police officer commits a battery against anybody, there is no justifiable use of force, we will be prosecuting them.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Jones.
You know, I understand the policeman bills of rights, but the policeman bill of rights do not supposed to supersede the Constitution of the United States, nor the Constitution of the state of Florida. Anybody that violates the law should be prosecuted, you know, brought up on charges. And we need to understand that, because if we don't change that, we'll never get out the legitimacy nor build the trust that we need to build with our communities. We need to show the community that we're not above the law, that we'll be held to those same standards as everyday citizens. And people say that you should be held to a higher standard. No, we should be held to the same standards. Just because we're trained, we're supposed to do things differently, but we do not have a pass to violate someone's civil rights, human rights, or constitutional rights. And we should not get a pass if we do something criminally wrong.
Well, thank you very much. And I just want to add a couple of things in terms of the administration against either law enforcement or police. A little history here. Back in 1986, there was a young man in the Orlando area by the name of Keith Rozier. Someone called the police saying someone had done something, and police came. It wasn't him, and I think Joe Kimok and some of you guys may want to look into this, Mr. Manley, as well. And he saw a police officer, ran, was shot in the back by Officer Kurt Myrie. And of course, they had the fleeing felon law. Though this individual did anything, and we thought that was a big miscarriage of justice back in that day. Then, hence up to 1999 with former now FBI Officer David Farrell, who was in that accident that killed two brothers coming from church, and they were blamed this wrong way accident. It dragged on for years, and obviously the officer got a way reduced charge, and it seems that those that worked in law enforcement were aided by those that were supposed to administer the law. So you might kind of want to look into those cases, and it still continues, or at least perceived to be going on today. Jamie, any other questions that you want to panelists?
No, I think we're right on time. We're supposed to be ending at 9 o'clock. So if we give every candidate 2 minutes to review and tell us why they think they're the best candidate for the job, that'll put us right about 9 o'clock. And,
okay, what we're going to do right now, then let's go from for the Florida Representative District 94. And Mr. Manley, in your closing remarks, again, mention the boundaries of your district, and you're going to be in Tallahassee if when, and what you hope to do.
Again, first of all, I just want to say thank you all again, Mr. Baltimore, Jamie, and DPCF for hosting this and supporting my campaign too. I am running for Florida House of Representatives, District 94. Again, the boundaries of that district is Fort Lauderdale, west of US 1, Wilton Manors, some of Lauderhill, some of Oakland Park, and East Plantation, east of University, in case people get a little confused there. And hopefully I'll be up in Tallahassee this upcoming legislative session. What we saw this past legislative session was one of the most dangerous legislative sessions for working people in Florida, for LGBT rights, for women's rights to control their own body, you name it, for workers, for housing rights. So what we need right now is somebody in Tallahassee who's going to carry this fight for Broward County, for House District 94, which is one of the poorest districts in this state. We need someone who's going to be fighting front and center for criminal justice reform, for climate change, which is one of the biggest issues of this decade that we have to get our act together and address strongly. Affordable housing, education reform, and making sure our public education is funded. So I know I'm the best person for the job. The incumbent has not gotten a lot done in the past 6 years. I think when I looked, less than 3 bills passed. I don't think he really got any passed. And I know that when I'm elected to Tallahassee, I'm going to be a loudmouth in Tallahassee that's going to get things done. I'll be able to work across the aisle. I'll be able to bring money back to this district. I know what I need to do. I know what needs to be done. I think I'm the best choice. I know I'm the best choice. And I've had conversations with people all across this district, thousands of people across this district. I'm the only person in this race. I raised about $37,000 without taking a dime from any corporation, without a dime from any PAC. I'm not funded by any special interest groups. Over 1,000 people across this country have donated to my campaign because they believe that this loudmouth 21-year-old is going to fight for them, this entire country too. So I hope to have your support, and let's get in this fight and win it.
Okay, so the old songs, you made 21 now. So you're 21, I thought you were still 20. All
Sorry,
right.
for 1 second. Sorry, I'm going to interrupt for 1 second. I just want to highlight that Elijah is the only candidate tonight that has been endorsed by the PCF. So.
Okay. All right. All right. Thank you. And of course, for the clerk of the court office, the keeper of records for Broward County efficiency, former Judge Speiser, your closing remarks.
Yes, this was very innovative and very effective, the way this was designed tonight. I appreciate being here to participate with all these other impressive candidates. I just want to say that for this position that I have put my name in for, I want to reemphasize that leadership and innovation are the skills that are necessary here. I have been recognized by receiving the endorsement from the Fort Lauderdale Sun Sentinel. I've received endorsement from several Democratic leaning clubs. Since this is a election on August 18th, which is an open primary, which means that Republicans, Independents, and Democrats can vote. I've had to look on the other side of the line here. I've received the endorsement from the Republican Party of Broward County as well. And most of the people that are leaders in that county are lawyers that, that are familiar with me. So I have a general across the board respect and appeal that I think everybody realizes is important and necessary for an effective makeover of the clerk's office. Again, making over the clerk's office will be in the best interest of not only the personnel that work there in terms of hoping to restore their self-image, but also equally important is a relationship that will be an open door relationship between the judges, the attorneys, and the consumers who need the clerk services without counsel. So yes, it'll be a task that will be challenging, but I'm here because I do not know how to walk away from challenges. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much. And we'll talk next to the candidates for our Broward County Sheriff, a very big department. And both of you have had experience working with BSO. So we'll start with you, Mr. Jones. Your closing remarks.
Thank you, Rodney. Thanks for the invite for tonight. We've listened to the candidates, or you're going to hear the candidates just running for this office. It's time for the voters to decide who they want. hopefully I clearly distinguished and separated myself from the other candidates in this field. See, because many of these candidates, at least 3 of them, had the opportunity to make the changes that we're crying for, that our community is crying for now. They were an authority, they had the opportunity, but they did not make those needed changes. And unfortunately, until the unfortunate death of Mr. Floyd, no one stood up, no one came forward. They were in those positions. Although the warning signs was there. In 2016, we lost 3 people here in Broward County, but no one stood up and started talking about these changes need to be made. We can no longer gamble with the future of our children, the future of this county, the future of our safety in this county. We no longer can gamble that. It's time to vote for a Democrat. I've been a Democrat for 47 years. I've been talking change since 2016. I've been talking the best police practices since 2016. The President Obama task force clearly outlined and put it out there, a strategic plan that will work in not only in this county, but in law enforcement anywhere. And one simple thing, I'm morally and ethically grounded. I would admit my mistakes, but more especially, I'm looking and will come to solutions. I'll make those hard decisions. And one of the hardest decisions is the 21st century. The rank and file, the union, and some people in this community may not agree with it, but this is time for that change. Remember to vote for me with your ballot, that you have mail-in ballot, early voting, and on August 18th. Willie Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Candidate for Sheriff, Broward County. Dean Smalling, your closing remark.
Thank you, Rodney. Thank you, Jamie. Thank you, Carolina. Thank you, Rodney, for hosting this forum to the Progressive Caucus of Florida. Thank you. I'm excited about this time that we're living in because this is a time of change. This is a time that our nation, our county is looking for leaders that are going to come together and make changes. And this is a perfect storm because I don't know when this has happened in Broward County, but we have candidates, pretty much open seats in the sheriff's race, in the public defender's race, in the state attorney's race, the clerk of the court. And I'm glad to see the progressive candidates that we have here. I'm a progressive candidate. I'm looking for change. Anywhere that I've gone in law enforcement, I've been a change agent. And I want you to visit my platform, my website, and look at my platform, smallingforsheriff.com. There's some things that we haven't discussed in this forum that's on my website to show you where I'm going and where I want to take the sheriff's office. I am a person of integrity. I am a person of character. I'm a person of experience. Not only do I have law enforcement experience, I've got military experience, and I've got experience in academia. That makes me a well-rounded candidate, viable, able to run this office on day one. I've been in the sheriff's office. I grew up in my law enforcement career in the sheriff's office, and I can go back and take it in the right direction that people are wanting and desiring to see from their police agency, their county police agency. Please vote for me on August 18th. Andrew Smalling, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And of course, the next candidates are for the state attorney for Broward County. You set the pace for the county, for everyone. And I'll give you that opportunity, Mr. Kimok.
Thank you, Rodney. There are 10 people in this race for state attorney, which is very, very good for you. It means that you have a choice. And there are a lot of good candidates. Teresa was a friend before we started this election. I'm confident that we're going to remain friends no matter what happens after the election. But so it comes down to issues. What are the differences between us? I'm the only candidate who has said that I will not ever seek cash bail. I'm the only candidate to say that I will not direct file a child. I will not seek mandatory minimums. I have been the most aggressive candidate in opposing and denouncing our racist and macabre death penalty here in Florida. I've been ranting and raving about about mass incarceration, and we have the plans to get it done. If you go to www.joekimok.com, you will see that we have detailed individual plans on each of these issues on how to completely dismantle our system and build something new. Our current system of mass incarceration traces its origins to slavery. We went from slavery to lynching to Jim Crow to mass incarceration, and there's a direct line, which makes me think about, since we're having this debate about what we want our system to look like in the future, what that debate looks like in 1850, prior to the Civil War. Most folks weren't debating about how to end slavery or whether to end it, but they were debating on how to change it. Should we allow it to go to free states? Should we allow slaves to run away to free states and go and get them? It was a small band of abolitionists who believed that that wasn't enough, that we cannot protect an inherently immoral system. We can't reform it. We've got to build something new. That's why I don't use the phrase criminal justice reform. We need to dismantle the whole system and build something new. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Kimok. And we'll give Ms. Fanning Williams, and I must say that you were a candidate before for this same office. We'll give you your opportunity for your closing remarks.
Thank you very much. First, I'd like to say that, I have nothing but the utmost respect for Mr. Kimok. He's right. We are good friends and will continue to be friends after our candidacy is finished. But here is where I stand. I see a platform that a lot of things about it I agree with, a lot of things I don't. And I have to say that this position is to be the head prosecutor for the county. When I was the division chief for the career criminal robbery unit, I saw the worst of the worst, and I saw a small group of people committing a majority of the crime, keeping many of us from feeling and being safe. And public safety is the #1 goal of the state attorney. Now, one of the things, we're all progressives that are sitting here in this room. And I would love to see major changes. I want to see them happen tomorrow, but I know better. I know because I've been part of the system for 25 years. I have had a major role in administration at the state attorney's office. I've had to sit down at the table and have compromised, and I've had to stand up and dig my heels in and turn around and just say no. And if you're going to be the person who's going to make these changes, you've got to have those years under your belt. And you have to have the guts and the courage to stand up and say no. And the person that you should pick for this position is the person that will do that. Who has the guts to stand up and the fortitude to do what's right. And that is me, Teresa Fanning Williams. You've got a 25-year prosecutor running as a Republican. If we don't put up the right candidate in this race, we may very well lose this seat and we will go backwards instead of forwards. We cannot lose this. And I'm Teresa Fanning Williams. I ask you to allow me to come back to finish what I started. Thank you so much. And I appreciate the Progressive Caucus having me here tonight. And thank you all so much for your time and attention. It's a pleasure to be here.
And I want to thank all the panelists. Obviously, we couldn't cover everything with the state attorney. We want to talk about the crime lab at your place, BSO, DNA, white collar crime, with some of the issues in the state, what's happening in our district, employment, healthcare, with the clerk of the courts, issues about efficiencies, folks that need documents and waiting, and the technology that will have to be in innovations. So some other forum, some other time. Jamie, thank you for the opportunity. I want to thank the Progressive Caucus as well. And we will see you Election Day. Early voting ends Monday, July 20th. So do that before then. And you've got the floor, Jamie. And thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Rodney, and thank you to all the candidates. Thank you, Carolina, for helping out with the timing tonight. Everybody, please, next Friday, the 24th at 6:30 is going to be our final roundtable, and we will have candidates for sheriff, state attorney, and then we're going to have 4 candidates for House and Congress. So it should be very, very exciting. And we really, really appreciate everybody coming out to watch and candidates for taking their time. And good luck the rest of the way, everybody. And Rodney, thank you so much, man. You've been great. Have a good night.